Hey, welcome everybody to, well, this is my second presentation of this pipeline workflow today at the Autodesk booth. We're going to take a look at Flame Premium and actually the Flame family of 5, which are a number of different products that we have which allow us to do a lot of collaboration and workflow between different applications. The first thing we're going to take a look at, though, is a commercial that was done by Drive-Thru Television in Minneapolis, Minnesota for Honda. And we're going to walk through the workflow for Flame Assist, for Flare, for Luster, some color grading, and then we're going to put it all together in a collaborative workflow environment. Even with, we'll sneak in a little Maya as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the final.
Woo! Sign the waiver.
Waiver.
Two seats, one for you and one for racing legend Mario Andretti. The fastest seat in sports sweepstakes. Enter for a chance to start an IZOD IndyCar Series race at shophonda.com.
So what a great sweepstakes. I would love to take a ride around the track with Mario Andretti. And in fact, some of the crew did on this shoot. And I thought we'd take a quick look at some of the things that you typically have in any sort of a production that can happen. You get different versions of the editorial that's going on. The idea here is that Mario Andretti is having a very calm drive, but the passenger is kind of freaking out. It's calm enough for Mario that he's waving to people in the audience. The shock wave is knocking ice cream cones off, but he's having a great time. And then they say, well, maybe the woman should actually wave at Mario, and then his eyes light up, those kind of things. Continuity issues. No gloves, but Mario always drives with his gloves on, and he's got his gloves in the next shot. No one caught it until pretty late in the production process. So they called him up and said, hey, can we borrow your gloves? So he FedExed the gloves to Minneapolis. This guy's actually one of the flame ops. His hands fit, so they used that as a practical. Shot all over 2 days with the Alexa camera. They also used, I think, 12 GoPro cameras that were mounted at various points on the car. And they were having a blast. This is where the crew said, you know, we're going to put on the suit, we're going to go out, have a good time. So they're doing all this, and what goes wrong? Probably the worst possible thing that can go wrong, other than a wreck. They blow the engine, and they don't have a backup car. So Bob George, the owner of Drive-Thru TV, was on set as a VFX supervisor, and they're like, what can we do? Well, first of all, we got to remove the spoiler off the front of the car, and we'll put it back on with Maya, because we got to tow it around the track using a minivan. So kind of embarrassing, but this is the stuff that happens, right? And it's great to have someone on set who knows the Flame product line, who can say, hey, I can do this, this is how we'll solve this problem, and take care of it. Okay, so essentially that's the challenge, right? Now, Toba is sitting on Flame Assist, one of the newest products that we have in our line of products. And what he can do for me in a collaborative workflow is he can do some preparation of this job before I get it for grading. So at this point, he could take an AAF or an XML or an EDL and start to put this together for me in a workspace that is actually sitting on my machine over here. So there's some networking going on in here where my workstation, which is Flame Premium, is hosting the whole session. The Flame Assist, it's got its own workspace. The Flare has its own workspace. He's going through and he's making all the conform adjustments. He can consolidate, he can link, he can do a number of different things to prepare this timeline for use. So now once he does that, he can take this timeline, scrub through it, make checks on it, all that sort of stuff. And then he's done this in a folder that I can get access to, which is the conform sequences. If you can drop that into that folder for me, Toba. And while he drops that into that folder for me, I'm going to sit here on the other screen. We're going to kind of switch this up a little bit. And I'm going to go into the grading application and get that rolling. So if I now open up the grading application, he's prepared that for me. I've got a bookmark to that location. And if I open that up, there's the piece that he just put together for me. If I take that, I'm going to drag and drop that down into my timeline area. And he did his assembly to the original ProRes Alexa material. So it's all log C, flat pass images that we can now use in here inside Lustre for doing the grading. The timeline gets built, it gets populated. We can kind of see that middle bar start to grow. All the different source clips will then populate inside my library, and I'll have a timeline built just like he prepared for me over in the Flame Assist. So now I can take this and I can then start scrubbing through this material just like he did to see exactly what's going on. Like I said, this is log C material. I might want to do some color management with this. Lustre, Flame Premium, all of our products have the ACES pipeline built into them. So if I go to the images and I go to transcode and I look at the LUT options that I've got here, here are different IDTs that I might want to use for this. I'm going to use the Alexa Log C IDT to go into the ACES pipeline. Then on my viewer, I can change that up so that we look at a transform for the particular viewer that I'm using, which is my current monitor here. Once I apply that, now we're using the ACES workflow. And what I see is the material converted from log C in a high dynamic range environment that I can then use for color grading. Now this is really useful if you're going to start mixing CGI material and material from different cameras. And it turns out that the cameras that were really used in this whole piece ended up only being from the Alexa camera. I think there was one shot that they used from the GoPro camera, and that was pretty easy. I think it's actually this shot here, and we'll hit on that in just a minute. So if we look at the very first shot, we could start doing some color grading on this using the tangent element panel that I have built up here. And if we just start using some of the tools in here for doing our primary color correction, building some contrast in, warming that shot, maybe cross-processing this a little bit, something like that, you can see me working on the primaries for this particular shot. I have 48 layers of secondary control for this. I've actually made it a little too warm at this point. We can go into the secondaries, enable those, and with the secondaries start to isolate color. Let's say that teal part of the front of the nose of the car. That becomes an area that we want to isolate. Fine. Remove some of the other area in there that we didn't really have interested in just by keying that out. Maybe we need to blur this just a little bit. But it gives me the ability now to go in and start to do some more grading on this shot using that secondary. And I'm just, like I said, using the panel to manipulate this, make it more teal, make it more green, whatever I wanted to do to that shot to really build on that. Over here on the right side, I have something called the grade bin. It's where I can do presets, whole different ideas for the shot. I'm just going to double click on that. There we go. And apply a look that I've already developed. And it's actually got a number of different secondaries in it. There's 4 different levels of correction that I've done on that, as well as the primaries. If I want to do that to the next shot as well, no problem, drag, drop, and we've done it to that shot. Same thing with the next one. So you can start to see, you can build consistency across shots really, really quickly. Maybe it's a good idea to see shots that are from the same area of the shoot together for grading. So we can do that pretty easily just by going to a C mode and doing a sort on this. When we do that, now we see Mario Andretti in his helmet, in his close-up, sorted again. Now we've isolated just that sequence. So now we can focus on that. This is a quick little setup that I did down here for that. But if I want to apply it to all the shots, all I need to do is select all those shots, drag and drop it from the first one to the next one, and it's applied to all those shots in unison. really quick ways of getting through shots. You've got to get through these shots really quickly when you're doing commercials, when you're doing features, things like that. It doesn't really matter. You're on the clock, and people are paying you big bucks to get through this stuff. So let's break that back out into the whole timeline. You can see how those shots have been redistributed into an A mode, a version of the timeline. The last thing I thought I'd show you real quick is just going back to that shot from the GoPro. This is the result color that we came up with. And the reason we kind of went this way, let me reset this. First of all, it's white. That's a problem. Second of all, you can see the GoPro camera in the reflection of the roll bar or the cage. So not really that much of a problem in here, because with the secondary, we can go in and we can start building a quick shape that we can then grade within the confines of this shape very quickly, something like this. Break that back around, and then use a shape tracker to analyze the shot. And now we've got that locked in, and we can start grading inside that to make it darker, whatever. We actually did this, I did this in 3 different steps. I did one that was actually an area of interest up there on the right-hand side, which helped balance the shot up there. Then I did one for the roll cage itself, and then I did one for the center area. And if we bring that back up like that, and we take a look at that secondary area in that, and look at my shape, and look at the mat, I'm using essentially what you might see in Flame, like logical operations where you're blending 2 different mats together and subtracting them from each other to give myself a result mat from something that started like that to something like that, and then I get the result that I want. At this point, I'd be ready to render this back, and I can render this back in different file formats and varieties. But we've already essentially got this rendered, and I'm going to move at this point back into Flame. So let's take a look at that as I manage to move out. Get back into Flame Premium at this point. So far, we started with the Flame Assist, and Toba's been helping me with that. We've done our color grading using the luster component of the Flame Premium package on this workstation. We've also started the process of the rendering of the grade, which will end up back in the Flame Premium. And at this point, we can go back and take a look at the Flame Premium as we continue this process. Now, I think I mentioned earlier that I'm kind of hosting this on this machine, even though Toba's using Flame Assist on that machine to do work to help me. Over here, what I think is interesting is if we go to my library, here is the Luster directory that I rendered from Luster into the Flame Premium portion of my library. If I open up the grade that we just were working with, grade 3, we see all of the clips, all their sources, and we see a final clip down here at the bottom that's got a little film strip. Well, one of the things that people have said, I really wish I could see this in a better view. Well, of course you can. This is something that's new in 2015. We can go through all these clips, scrub on any of them, see more metadata about them, get down to the last clip here, which is actually the timeline that's already been assembled for me once I did the render from Luster. So a lot of the work has been done for me in this regard. Down here in the timeline that I've got of my original uncolor corrected material, I'm going to use that as a reference copy and create a new track on the top of that, take the graded timeline and snap it on top of the ungraded timeline. Well, what does that do? Well, it gives me a visual history of what's gone on in the shot. So now if I move my focus up and down the timeline using this little marker here, anywhere on the timeline I can see the before and the after, and it gives me a visual history of what was going on any of those shots, if anyone's got a question about that. So it's a really cool way of making that work. In my library area, I'm seeing a lot of data here. I'm going to filter this out so I only see my libraries and not necessarily any of the other data that's going on. Bring back my reels. And within my assignment desk that I've got here, I have a number of different reels that I can see sorted out. One of them is a timeline that I've already started playing a little bit more with. Let's go ahead and close this one up. We'll bring this down to start working with. The reason I want to do this, it's got some markers in it that are going to help me show you a few of the new features. But one of the things that that I wanted to call your attention to is from the video that we saw of the gloves and the hands that were gloves, no gloves, that continuity error. Well, here it is again. And like I said, we didn't find this out until very late in the process. So I'm going to ask Toba, who's running Flare on that workstation in his own workspace, to help me out on this. So what we'll do is we're going to add another track to this. Up here in my library, I've got the gloves. So there's Derek wearing the magic gloves. We'll take those and just snap them into position on the timeline. I've now built a vertical stack of the chroma key element that we're going to use and the gloves themselves. With these two clips there, I can go and create what's called a batch effect. And it's essentially the nested pipeline of the composite that's going to happen. But it's a great way of being able to take those shots, get them in the right timing, and then be able to take that and drag and drop it into the library that Toba is using. All right, so here's a folder in here that's for Flare. We're going to acquire access for it. We're going to take that particular element, we're going to drag that up and drop it into the for Flare directory, just like that. Once that's done, let's see. Toba, can you go ahead and open up that folder? Let's see what's there. Nothing from Flare yet? Let me, real quickly, let's see. I got to release access. I'm sorry, my bad. Okay, try that again. There it is. So passing that back and forth between these workstations, that becomes like a Dropbox. Even though I'm hosting this, this is a mechanism, a conduit, to get from one workstation to the other. So Toba's going to go ahead and start working on that on the Flare workstation. The other thing we talked about a little bit from the shoot was this particular shot. All right? Remember, we've got the tow rope on there. There's a shadow on there. We're missing the spoiler on the front of the car. This is Maya. We've got to send this off to Maya. So what we're going to do with this shot is we're going to, again, take it into our batch pipeline. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's select that shot like this. Create a batch pipeline for that. We can then add an action node, which has got a camera analyzer in it that is going to help me put together a track using this mono analyzer. It uses the Maya camera to do the analysis on this. And then by going and doing the track on this, we can get a solve that Maya can use. Now, by using a quick little tool called a batch snapshot, sitting in here, I've got the camera solve already taken care of. So we're kind of fast forwarding just a little bit in the process here. And if we shrink this down a little bit, this is the 3D track that I've done using the tracker inside Action. I've put a couple of locators on here as well, so we can see that axis on that axle, another one on the tip of the cone, another one there. And because I've got a 3D camera, which is the equivalent of the Maya camera, I can then take that and export this out to a location for, where do you want that? Okay, here, how about for Maya? We'll put it at that point and then say save. And then now Toba, who's now running Flare, he's running Maya, he's running Flame Assist, he's going to start working on that shot over in Maya. I'm going to continue working on my content here. So let's put up the Flame Premium back on screen in full, in all its glory. So there's a few things I wanted to kind of get through really quickly here. So let's take a look at some of the things that we could do on these shots. One of them is kind of a new tool called 3D Shape. And by using 3D Shape, we can really create some visual interest in a shot. So let's go ahead and go straight into that batch pipeline, right? This is my BFX pipeline. Go ahead and add an action node in here, drop that in. And straight away inside Action, let's go into a two-up view here, like this. And we can get rid of the library at this point. What we've got is a pipeline that I can now add a 3D shape. And what's a 3D shape? Well, it actually starts with a G-mask. And that G-mask, I'm just going to draw around the helmet. And then once I've got that drawn, I can go and I can start. Oh, let's undo that one. I didn't want that last one. Once I've got that done, I can go in and start making, much like you do with softness, right? Just extrude this, or at least pull that out, so that becomes a shape that I can texture, that I could do projection on. I can do a number of different things with this to start doing some look development and some interesting effects. Kind of, again, fast forwarding, because we've only got a short amount of time to do this. I've actually got the 3D shape kind of already built here for us. Just a little bit, like I said, fast forwarding just a bit. Here's the same pipeline with the same G-mask that I drew. That's now been tracked into the helmet, just using a 2D tracker, with a light that is now illuminating that edge, because that light is being shown on a projection of that helmet onto itself. If we go to the 3D shape, I can turn that media projection on and off, and you can see I'm kind of right back where I started, right? The really interesting part of this is when you're thinking about look development is I've added an image-based lighting node, IBL. If we go into, let's say, the content that we got from Luster, check this out. Let's just take this green grass and drop it instead onto the helmet. That becomes the lighting environment for that light wrap. If we go back into our modes over here and start to drag out our, let's go back here, get that out of the way. There we go. And then start to drag this softness out, we can really feather this into the helmet quite a bit. And you could put any image in there you like. It doesn't really matter. You know, it could be Mario's face. We could drop that in there. That becomes the tool that becomes the image-based light. And then I can take that element and I can start moving it as a reflection and light the helmet really, really easily. It's a great way of taking a tool and repurposing it for something that was really never intended to use as a look development tool. All right, let's move on down the timeline. The next piece that I thought we'd take a look at really real quickly is this is a shot where the infield actually looks nice and manicured, right? Looks nice and groomed. But if we go into the pipeline that made this up, this is the batch effects pipeline for this shot. And if we go into like an earlier section, that's what it looked like. Now the guys at Drive-Thru kind of took a traditional tact on this by using some grass, cutting some patches, painting some things up to make this work. I took a different approach. I took that same element and I did a freeze frame of it. Then I used a paint node to do my own work on that on a single frame. And then I piped that into the action composite so that I have this particular clip here. These are the original elements that Drive-Thru used. I'm going to hide those. So now you see the patches come back. I'm going to take my element and unhide it. So there's my patchwork in there. And I'm using what's called an extended bicubic. It's mapped over the whole shot. Now, this extended bicubic is something that actually came in 2014 in its software. And the cool thing about it is that if I want to, I can see the UV map of that same element, that same grass, and I can start manipulating it to put it in place, to nudge it, to kind of put it wherever I want. But even more impressive, I think, is that I can highlight all these points, go to the vertices, go into a tracker, and I've got 25 tracker points. For every one of those vertices has its own coordinate point. And then that tracks right along with those elements, and each of those then is now pinned to the surface area of where that grass is. So in a very quick way, we've just solved a problem using these new tools and creating this extended bicubic that would have taken a lot longer to do in the previous method of using these separate patches and things like that. Okay, let's move on down to some really quick things on the timeline. This one, this one was all over the commercial, where the guy who's riding in the back seat of the car, let's go to our 2-up view on this. So as we scrub through this, he's bouncing around, but there's no motion blur, okay? So within the pipeline of Flame and the batch effects pipeline, we'll feed that into motion analysis. It creates the vectors based on the motion, feed that into a motion blur node, and now we've got our camera motion. Super simple, really fast way of dealing with that. Moving down to this particular shot, we've got the woman waving to Mario. Again, this is a technique that was put into the application in 2014, but these are super simple things where you can go in and add a lens flare, let's say. Let's use a master prime lens flare. Go ahead and say, put that in. Drops in, very fast to do that. If I go into action and I switch what I want to adjust, here's the lighting controls. Well, let's make it, let's put it a little higher in frame. You can start to see those flares work their way in. You can imagine that you don't have to do a lot of plug-in work now with all these tools that are built right into the software, which is pretty interesting. A couple more shots here that I wanted to take a look at. This one is I'm going to do this one as, instead of affecting the clip, let's do this as a transform, like an adjustment layer. So what I'm doing is I'm going to select this clip and make a gap effect on top. That gap effect is going to receive a tool called Matchbox. Now, Matchbox is a set of GLSL shaders that I have in here, and one of them actually happens to be, let's do this. Let's go back into Matchbox. Let's change the shader, and I've got one in here that was done by one of our customers, actually, Ivar Beer from Cinepost. And if we take this as OpenGSL, this is a snow shader. And you can see how this has a bunch of falling snow. And the idea here is not so much the snow that I want on this. Let's turn on a comp node and use a blending mode like add. The idea was to try and replicate some dust. Well, that's actually, the snow is falling a little too much. So let's take the speed of that down just a little bit, something like that. We can adjust the way the snow works, the way the snow flies with wind, and now we've got something that works in there. Let's take the amount of dust down. Now that is added to the dust that was already there to really enhance the effect. The last thing in this particular timeline I wanted to take you a quick tour of is the idea of enhancing the graphics on this. This is just a 2D element at this point. I'm going to take a gap effect. Let's add a color source to that of black. Again, we're going to use this great set of tools in here for doing, let's select that, and go into our batch pipeline. And within action, of course, that's where we do our compositing. Go inside that, and we could use inside here the ability to go get a vector-based piece of type or logo, which happens to be the Honda logo as an SVG. And if you have ever used Illustrator or something like that, certainly you can export Illustrator through Adobe pipelines, but something that's more ubiquitous in the industry is SVG, all right? Take that and import that. That comes in as a group, and if I unhide that group, these are all the points in that particular setup that if we go here and take a look, there's the vector-based element that we just imported here, and we can go and we can manipulate any of those axes just by rotating that around, something like that. Or we could start extracting it as a 3D shape, something like that, in 3D space. Or, of course, we can go back to my pipeline here, and as you recall, I've got some setups sitting here on my desktop. One of them is the Honda logo. We'll drag and drop that in. And I spent a little more time on this one creating a cast shadow, creating a fall off for this. It's using the same elements as we see here, but using a G mask to create the fall off, a shadow cast, If we explode this out and unhide that, perfect. That's exactly the same element that we were using, just refined a little bit more down the pipeline. Okay, so that's pretty much done with this particular timeline. Now, Toba, are you done yet? I've been doing all this work over here, and you've been... Okay, great. So Toba's been working in Flame Assist on the very first shot that we were looking at. So I'm going to go back to my desktop. You'll remember the glove shot. At least I hope you remember the glove shot. So looking at that first element on the timeline, that's what we need to go get. And in the libraries, you'll also remember, I hope, the shared libraries, and one of them is the flare library. Inside there is the finished element. Yep, it's all ready for me. So we're going to take that and snap that into place on my timeline, like this, above the gloves element that was there. And now we've got Mario Andretti with the gloves on his hands. Nice job, Toba. That's great. If I needed to see exactly what he did, that's fine. Keep it selected. Go into the BFX for that. Open it up. There's the pipeline that he's been working on. There's the gloves. There's the action setup. Here's the comp. If we take a look at that, this is essentially a whole bunch of garbage mats that are going on this shot in order to accomplish the replacement of the gloves and the masking out of the hands that were there to make that happen. That's a nice job. Thank you. Let's move on from that, because the last shot in here, and I bet Toba's got this ready too. Let's show Maya. Can we put Maya up on the screen as well in a split? Terrific. Okay, so Toba's been working on this shot in Maya to create the new spoiler for the front end of the car that we see here that's missing the spoiler. We're gonna go and use that. So I'm gonna open this up. I've already got my BFX pipeline pretty much in place. Come on, open up. Come on. Select that, and there it is. Perfect. So in this pipeline, just to kind of refresh your memory on what was going on, we've got the car coming through that shot. We see the tow rope, we see the shadow. The next step in here, get rid of the tow rope and the shadow using some garbage masks. That works out pretty well. Now Toba has given me the final shot as a multi-channel Openexr. And if I go through this, we can see the different elements in that Openexr file. That's the beauty pass. That then pipes through this batch setup that I've got, doing some extra color correction, doing a little bit of resizing, but essentially getting here to the end where it then pops onto the front using that camera data that I gave him 20 minutes ago or so, something like that. You're very fast. Nicely done. So that's now in there. The garbage masks are in there. And the last thing that I thought that I'd show you on this is if we take a look at this piece and set a context right there. So then what we can do is look at this as context 1. So if we come over here, there's the final. Looks like that. But someone said, hey, what happened to the logos? Well, logos didn't go anywhere. Toba just gave me an alternative. So nested into this shot from Maya, we have the original logo version. We've got an alternate version if we want to make something generic. And we've got a great round trip workflow now with all these different products that we've seen throughout the pipeline. That's pretty much it. We've really covered everything from Flame Premium to the Flame Assist to a little bit of Maya, some Flare, some Luster, putting it all back together in a collaborative workflow using the talents of Toba-san, Toba-san and myself as the lead. And I really appreciate your help, and I appreciate your attention in our demonstration of the Flame Family 5 product line. check it out. There's a pod on the side if you want to see something more specific. If you got some questions, I'm happy to answer them. That's pretty much it. Thanks very much.
Flame 2015 is packed full of new features for high-end finishing that will enable the best artists to do their best work. These new features are a big part of what makes Flame Premium 2015 so exciting, as Flame Premium has Flame at the core, and Flame Premium now offers a multi-seat workflow by including more of the Flame family of products, starting with Flame and including the powerful color grading toolset of Luster, which runs on the same workstation as Flame, combining real-time color grading with highly interactive finishing. And now, Flame Premium 2015 comes with 2 new licenses. The first is for Flare, which enables another artist on a different workstation to collaborate on shot-based visual effects tasks. The second license is for the new Mac-based Flame Assist, which supports the Hero workstation with a timeline-based workflow capable of handling a broad range of creative and technical tasks. And with new flexible licensing options for Flame Assist and Flare, you can easily scale your Flame Premium workflow to handle spikes in production. It gives you balance between creativity and efficiency without sacrificing the performance you need for creative brainstorming, look development, and high-end finishing. Autodesk Flame Premium 2015 is more than a product. It's also an amazing high-end workflow.